Welcome, everyone, to the 2025 Revitalize Your Midlife Symposium. This event is designed to inspire, empower, and enlighten us all as we navigate the intriguing journey of midlife together. So, June isn't just marking the arrival of summer. Yay! We're also celebrating my birthday month. Yay! And if any of you know me, or maybe you don't know me, I'm a lifelong learner. So, this symposium is a testament to my personal belief that everyone deserves the right to feel good in their body and my ongoing commitment to lifelong learning. You know, midlife is a period ripe with reflection, growth, and most importantly, opportunity. It's a phase where we can leverage our past experiences, welcome change, and confidently stride into our best selves. My aim with this symposium is to equip you with the tools, insights, and motivation to successfully maneuver this thrilling chapter of our lives. If you leave this event with even one piece of valuable information, I'll consider this symposium a triumph. Now, if you're watching live, you can always post questions and we'll take the questions live. However, if you are unable to join us, every moment of this will be available for replay. I am happy to announce that this event is sponsored by Small Space Pilates and the Sisters in Service podcast. So, you have any questions? Put them in the chat. Let's chat about it. So, I am excited and thrilled to introduce my first guest because this is day one, you guys. We have 6 more days after today. My first guest is Debi Robinson. Debi is a renowned bone health expert, a certified yoga therapist, and a functional health coach. She's busy, you guys, just saying. Debi has been coaching women through osteoporosis and has a deep understanding of their journey because at the age of 51, she underwent a total hip replacement. So she understands the fear and frustration that comes with feeling like your bones are fragile and unreliable. So she is very passionate about empowering women to take control of their bone health. And I am happy today because welcome, Debi Robinson.
Hi, Kat. So happy to be
Hi.
here.
Well, for those of you that don't know, Debi was on the very first symposium last year, and she was the first person I thought about for her to come back. So, welcome.
Oh, that is so sweet. Thanks. So happy to be here. I love, love, love to blow up the whole bone health.
Right?
Yeah.
So, Debi, I know that. Can you start with your personal journey with the hip replacement and how, was getting interested in bone health prior to that or in conjunction with that?
So when I was 50, my hip joint collapsed. I had a injury and then I had a surgery to try to repair it. And 4 months after that surgery, my hip joint completely collapsed. And I was only 50 years old. So I was in pain all the time, very, very limited in my life, could barely move, um, and had to kind of learn about bones really earlier than I should have. I mean, traditionally, we don't have a scan to look at our bone health till we're in our mid 60s or 60 or beyond. That's when Medicare covers it or doctors recommend running it. So this is something that happened early when I don't even know if I had heard of the word osteoporosis. I mean, maybe I had, but I don't know. So I had this experience of a collapsed hip joint and just this realization of how important our bones are. I mean, I never thought about it before. And it just completely stopped me in my life from where I was. And now I had to figure out what to do. And so that's what I've done for the past, 9+ years.
Yeah, that must have been frightening. I mean, during your recovery, what were you thinking at this time? You were just like, am I going to be the same after this? What's in store for me down the road? Did you think things like that?
You know, it's really interesting. I thought about that before when I actually made my decision to have a hip replacement, because if you think about a hip replacement, you think about your leg bone. They're actually going to cut the top ball off of the leg bone you were born with, the leg bone that you've used your whole life. They're actually going to cut that ball off. They're going to stick in a shaft, put a fake ball into your hip joint. And so my first initial thoughts were, wait a minute, what if something doesn't work? What if they cut my leg bone off? Now what do I do? So it was honestly leading up to it. And that collapsed hip joint, I lived like that for 17 months. And I did it because I thought, okay, I'm a yoga therapist. I know my stuff. Let me do all that I can to fix my body. But what happened, my joint collapsed because the first surgery that I had collapsed it. So really, I kind of was, put into a place where I couldn't do anything about it. But once I had it, Kat, because I'm a yoga therapist and I teach yoga, and I was teaching 8 classes at that time every week, I knew that I could build myself back up. And so it really was before making the decision to say, yes, go ahead and cut the top of my leg bone off and give me a hip replacement. That's where the decision was, not really after. After I'm like, okay, I got this.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you talk about osteoporosis, but can we, for those that are maybe new and maybe they've watched, but they don't really know the difference between osteopenia and osteoporosis, can you refresh our memories a little bit?
Yeah. Okay. So our bones are building up and built and breaking down. That happens throughout our whole life, building up and breaking down. And so they're building up and more than they're breaking down until about our 30s. And then when our 30s happen, there's more breakdown than build up. So as we're going along, that's a slow process, not anything you need to be scared about, but raise awareness to it happening, because there's things you could do to maintain as much bone strength that you have when you're in your 30s and 40s. So I think it's important to raise awareness there. What happens then, we go through menopause. And when we go through menopause, the greatest decrease of bone density occurs, or bone mass occurs, which is 5 to 7 years post-menopause. The first stage of bone loss, when we are moving away from when we were our best to the next phase, it's called osteopenia. Now, the way that we diagnose, the way that we look at our bones is traditionally through an X-ray, and the X-ray is called a DEXA scan. And so we get a number when we do this X-ray, and it'll put us in a category. Osteopenia is the category where you're not 30 anymore, right? So now you're losing bone. There is a point where bone loss becomes a disease, and that is at the negative 2.5 on that DEXA scan, which is then osteoporosis, which is disease state of bone loss. So osteopenia is bone loss, but Kat, what it really means is that you're not 30 anymore. And I know that I don't look.
Dang it. Dang it.
Dang it, but also, okay, I don't look 30 anymore, right? I'm accepting like there's wrinkles and things are kind of not where they used to be, before. And so our bones are going to there's going to be some kind of loss. So yeah, the stage before osteoporosis is osteopenia.
As far as women are concerned, who's most at risk of osteopenia and or osteoporosis?
Well, part of the problem is we look at osteoporosis as this disease or this process that happens as we age. So we thought it was a progressive degenerative disease. We get older, we're going to lose bone. That's what it is. Oops, hopefully I don't get osteoporosis. But that's actually not the case. That's not the case at all. The thing is, there's so many contributing factors or root causes to bone loss. So we need to understand that there's all of these things that are going to be happening and that are going to be contributing to bone loss, and that it's not just because we're getting older. And I think that's cruelly, honestly, Kat, my whole thing is that I want to raise awareness to what is this? How do we look at it? Because what happens in my line of work is I meet women who are just diagnosed, or women who just went into the osteoporosis world, right? They might have had a DEXA scan for years and they had osteopenia. Now they're in osteoporosis and they're like, oh no, because we didn't realize there's things we could do to stop it, to reverse it. And so raising your awareness to that. So I think just honestly educating ourselves that as we age, our bones are going to potentially go through there's many factors, many contributing factors. And so learning what's the lifestyle we need to stop bone loss and to support bone building.
I love that answer. I just learned a whole lot. I don't know about you guys. That's why I love having Debi. I'm like, oh, I want to write notes and I can't. You talked about the DEXA scan. Are there any kind of symptoms, anything that we should be looking for that would make us think that maybe something's not right with our bones? Or is the DEXA scan the be all and end all?
The DEXA scan sucks. I don't know if I could say that, but it's not the end all be all. There is a better technology that's new, emerging, and being pushed out there by the orthopedic surgeons. We could talk about that in a second, but let me answer what you asked me. In terms of symptoms to know, they call it a silent disease. Osteoporosis is a silent disease because a woman might not realize she has osteoporosis until she falls and fractures. So they do call it a silent disease. However, there are some things that before we get that diagnosis or that X-ray to look deeper. Now, one thing is if you take your hands, Kat, right underneath your lower ribs, so where your lower ribs are and the top of your pelvic bone, there's a space there between your lower rib cage and your pelvic bone. Sometimes a physician may put their fingers in between the space below the ribs into the top of the pelvis. Now, they say there should be 4 fingers. I feel like I do so much stretching and I have a pretty limber body and I have really good posture. I could barely get 4 fingers there, but I could kind of get 4 fingers, just 4 fingers, kind of maybe squishing it, right? Pushing it in there. So one of the things the doctors will do is they will look there, and if they can't get all 4 fingers in there, then they might actually, I guess in some cases, diagnose compression wedge fractures, some spinal fractures. So one of them would be that. The other thing would be a loss of height. And the loss of height, now as we age, we have degeneration in our discs, but our discs are very, very thin to begin with. They're not very thick things. That's one thing. But if you did have a compression fracture, so if you did have a fracture of your spine, that would cause you to fall forward. And there would be, you would get shorter according to when you're measured. So there's that, or back pain, because that could be an indication of a compression fracture. Any kind of pain where you potentially had a stress fracture on a bone or something like that, maybe. But in terms of other symptoms, not really. Not things that you could notice. Although I would say this, if you're celiac or you potentially have certain metabolic conditions that are going to negatively affect digestion and absorption of nutrients, then you can maybe deduct that potentially that could be contributing to low bone density or low bone quality.
I have a question for you. Do certain medications do anything to our bones? Is that another kind of thing that we should look at, or no?
Yeah. If you're on PPIs, protein pump inhibitors, so any of these digestive support medications, I believe it's Prevacid, Omeprazole, any of those they're called protein pump inhibitors. And so for those ladies that have digestive issues, which the pill doesn't fix digestion, right? It might take away the immediate discomfort, but it's actually not going to fix your digestion. You have to understand, why are you not digesting? There's lots of things you could do there. So PPIs, anyone on PPIs, protein pump inhibitors, and any of the others, there's H2 blockers that are not necessarily linked to bone loss in the way that the PPIs are. Those are blocking the digestive enzymes. So digestive support medications, and then anti-inflammatories. So any of these like cortisone type medications are going to get involved in bone. There's also potentially some of the mood stabilizing drugs might have an effect on bone health as well. And then there may be some other medications that aren't linked. But when you start to mess with your biochemistry with the medication, there's usually a downstream negative component. And quite often the bones take the brunt of that.
Take the brunt of the work. Debi, if I've been diagnosed with osteopenia, and I remember years ago when women thought that was just, I don't know what they thought. They thought, I can't move, I can't do anything. So if I come to you and I said, I've been diagnosed with osteopenia, what would you say to me? Because I said, the doctor said I can't exercise, I can't do this, I can't do that. What would you say to me?
I would say to you that that's outdated, totally outdated. We've been misled and misguided, and that big pharma, big healthcare, and big food have controlled the narrative. So here's what happened. In the 1990s, we only had the term osteoporosis. And then in the 1990s, in the 1992, actually, in Rome, groups of orthopedic surgeons got together and they spoke about, or they came up with the term osteopenia. So now we have women in the osteoporosis category and women in osteopenia. So these were just 2 words that were out there. One's a disease, one's a medical term. Now there was a pharmaceutical company, Merck, that had a medication, Fosamax, which is a bisphosphonate, that heard about a machine that by Hologic, a DEXA scan that was doing an X-ray of bone density. Well, they had these numbers, this criteria, they had this machine, and they had this medication. In 1997, Medicare reimbursed doctors for DEXA scans. So now all the doctors were buying DEXA scans. I know, Kat, but this is the truth. This is what happened.
Yeah.
So the doctors are buying the DEXA scans. They have them in their office. They're getting reimbursed for them. And now 50% of the women over age 50 are either going to be osteopenia, which is a medical term, or osteoporosis. And there's the pill. So Fosamax was actually one of the first blockbuster drugs ever. And then another thing happened a few years later, the Women's Health Initiative. And the Women's Health Initiative, about 5 years later, now that was a study on hormones that said that hormones cause cancer and strokes. And that study took hormones away from women. So really, since the 1997, and that was a botched study, or I don't know if botched is the right word, but it wasn't peer reviewed. It was sensationalized in the media. It was the wrong form of hormones with the wrong administration of hormones. And so really where we started going wrong with bone health and disempowering women and taking them out of the equation of being in control started in the 1990s.
Oh, man. Why do women get such a, I won't say a bad rap, but I hear about hormone health and what we were told back in the day about hormones. And now you're talking the same thing with bone health. And I'm like, and we believe them. That's the part that gets to me, is that we believed all this, because who else are you going to go to? Oh, it's a doctor. They did the study. And I remember Fosamax. I remember hearing about it. So, Debi, when a woman is suffering from, let's say she's full-blown osteoporosis, is it reversible through exercise, nutrition, etc.?
Yeah. So the question, is osteoporosis reversible? Now, that's one that I've been saying for a few years. Yes, it is. And I have a podcast. I interview a lot of doctors, a lot of orthopedic surgeons, and they're a little bit more cautious on that. If you're close to the negative 2.5 mark and you have osteoporosis and you do all the things necessary, the way you move, the way you think, you manage your stress, you do the proper movement, you eat the right foods, and you take care of your gut health, because gut health is a big player in this. So if you take care of your gut health and you make sure that you're digesting, absorbing your nutrients, then yes, you can reverse osteoporosis, because I've seen it. I've had plenty of women that have. I see reversing bone loss. So depending on where you are on that spectrum. And so it is reversible. And I think that's the important thing, Kat, because up until now, we didn't think that way. And neither do a lot of doctors. And actually, there's still so many physicians stuck in that broken traditional medical system that we have, that is a disease management system, not a wellness or health building system. Those physicians that are stuck in there, many of them don't even get it yet. So then it becomes this combative, relationship between a woman and her doctor. It's just completely sad. That's why I do what I do. I'm going to change it.
Why are they stuck though, Debi? Why are they, for you and I'm, I love learning. And when something I've been thinking for a while changes or shifts in the fitness industry, I'm kind of looking at, I'm like, hey, let me research this a little bit. Do they just not want to be up on the latest and greatest, or it's just easier to kind of stick your head in the sand and be like, okay, this is what it is, and I'm sticking with that?
No, not really. I mean, these are bright people, like some of the brightest people. One of the doctors I interviewed, he said, we're the brightest people in this country. We were, coming from America, and just say around the world, we're the brightest people in the room. He said, and how we let this happen, how we became pawns, how we allowed big pharma to control us. So big pharma, big healthcare, they fund the medical schools. They've trained physicians for years since we've had these pills to find the disease, and here's the pill for the disease. The reimbursements that are given to physicians now are so low that these doctors are burned out. They see 20 patients a day. They go into the room. They have 10 minutes with you on your EMDR, the medical records. If the DEXA scan gets put in there, it'll pop up that you have osteoporosis, and it'll be popping up for them. Here's the pill, or here's the injection, or here's the recommendation. So when you have 10 minutes to meet with Susie Q, and you're going to walk into that office and you've already seen 20 other women that day, and you sit there with her, okay, you had your DEXA scan, okay, you have osteoporosis, okay, here's the pill. It's a broken system. And
So they're checking the box is what
yeah,
they're doing. They're checking the box.
well, they're checking the box, but I mean, these are, the one I interview physicians that don't want to do that anymore. They call it bad medicine, but so many of them are just caught in the system and caught in what they're doing. And, also, this is kind of newer information. So there's a better diagnostic tool now that we have. The orthopedic surgeons are starting to enter this world, and not enter this world. That's what I say. I'm like, okay, so now the osteoporosis, but now the orthopedic surgeons are entering. I'm like, wait a minute, you guys are the bone doctors. If you're not the bone doctors, who are? I mean, you guys are touching the bones, fixing the bones, manipulating them. So now that the orthopedic surgeons are getting in, they're really bringing in this different perspective on what we need to do for our bone health and how we can look at it and what we should focus on. So the DEXA scan focuses on density, and density is not an indicator of our fracture risk. That's where we've gone wrong for so many years.
Wow. What types of movement should women do if they are diagnosed with osteopenia or osteoporosis, or are they limited in what they can do?
Yeah. So you asked the question about, can we reverse osteoporosis? And I said, yes, we could reverse bone loss and we could reverse osteoporosis. How do we do that? Well, we have two main things that we need to focus on, or really there's three. You have to create stronger muscles. So any kind of movement that's going to create stronger muscles, we have to create stronger muscles, because the bigger and stronger your muscles are, the more weight they're going to apply to the bones, even in a seated position, just resting, but they're also going to create more tension and more push and pull when you're exercising. So anything that's strengthening your muscles. I love yoga. I think that if you're doing weights, you got to do it with a trainer or someone that knows proper function, so you don't get injured. And to me, yoga is the best, because you have your body anywhere and everywhere. You could do it all the time. So making sure you strengthen your muscles is really, and from a physical perspective, you don't want to fall, because falls are what fractures bones. So you need to work on balance and foot steering and ankle joint mobility and posture and alignment. So that is a big thing we have to focus on. The other thing is the food you eat. You have to eat food. You have to be digesting, absorbing it. So we have to make sure that we have a healthy diet and healthy gut. And then you need to manage stress, so you're not secreting bone dissolving hormones all day long.
It's funny you said that. I have a saying. I always say, keep it moving. And keep it moving is exactly why, I say that, because of what Debbie's talking about. Movement helps so much in your body, from making your bones stronger. It's a great connection, or almost like a direct adrenaline shot right to your brain. And let's talk a little bit. So I keep going back to this scenario. What happens if a woman just sits still? She gets that diagnosis. She's like, oh, I can't move. I can't do anything. How does that affect the brain, Debbie?
Okay, well, because now I'm realizing the question you asked before, I only did half of it, but this sedentary not movement is a part of it. You asked me, what shouldn't she do? Well, being sedentary and not moving, that actually is one of the root causes of bone loss, is not moving enough. So being sedentary is not good. The other two movements we have to be careful of with yoga, with bones, our bone health with osteoporosis, no forward bending of your spine. You should and can bend at your hip joint. So we need to learn how to load up in our hip and bend in our hip joint, but we cannot and should not flex our spine forward. Okay, so that's the thing there with that no. And then being sedentary, when you're going to be sedentary, it's bad for everything, because things in motion stay in motion. So sitting is not going to be good for your brain. It's not going to be good for your bones. It's not going to be good for your mood. It's not going to be good for how you feel. So there's just a lot of components. And sometimes women are scared still because they get a diagnosis and they don't move because they're scared still. So that is something. So yeah, being sedentary, doing nothing is not good. And you know what, Kat? You have your body, you have your breath, You could be sitting, if you have some problems with your knees, your problems with your hips, you could put on some music and start dancing. You could be pushing away
Absolutely.
from, I mean, there is so much we could do
Do.
anytime.
I love that. You're speaking my language, Debbie. You're speaking my language for sure. I just think it's, we get into this, I don't know, mode sometimes where we're just, we're living our life and someone says, "Oh, and maybe you should exercise." I think I've taken exercise out of my vocabulary and I've put in movement instead. So getting up out of your chair, especially entrepreneurs or anyone who sits for a long time, playing some music, put that dance list on and just dance like no one's watching you. And simple things like that. I think it's important that we take what the doctor gives us and say, okay, what's the best thing for me? My husband was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis quite a few years ago. And the doctor said, okay, you take this medication, you don't move. And my husband came home and he goes, "Is that right?" And I go, "No, I want you to move. It doesn't have to be HIIT workouts, but you can, you can do, walking and stuff." And to this day, we walk together all the time. So I think it's important to understand that yes, there's this fear, and then fear can either keep you here or you can say, what else can I do for my body to help me? Do you recommend women around the age of 50, do you recommend all women get a DEXA scan?
Yeah, I mean, to get a baseline DEXA would be great. Now, first of all, I don't recommend, there's a better way to look at bones. So there's another one that I would recommend, but it's out of pocket. It's not covered by insurance yet. So
Mhm.
there's that. And so we could talk about that. And I do think we should talk about that. But if you could, I just found my baseline DEXA scan that I had when I was 50. And I'm so glad my doctor ran that. Why she ran it, I don't know.
Mhm.
But I'm so glad that I had this baseline, because then I could actually see at 53 where I went to from 50, when my hip joint was collapsed, when I wasn't
Mhm.
moving, when I wasn't using it, when I was, I'm going to use the word sedentary, but I wasn't just sitting around, right? I could barely move
Mhm.
because my hip was collapsed. And I could see the degeneration in my hip from 50 years old until
Mhm.
I had my hip replacement. So, yeah, it would be great if we could get a baseline, and it also kind of maybe could be a wake up call for a lot of women, because then you're like, whoa,
Mhm.
wait a minute, what? I'm this close to osteoporosis and process, and I'm only
Mhm.
50. So it might be a
Mhm.
motivator, but the DEXA scan is actually an X-ray, and so you're going to be exposed to
Mhm.
radiation. So there is
Mhm.
that, Pat, is that we want to
Mhm.
minimize our exposure to radiation, even if it's not a very high amount. Over
Mhm.
time throughout our life, we get our teeth x-rayed, and now we're getting our
Mhm.
bones x-rayed, and we might have some other thing we're getting x-rayed.
Mhm.
So we want to kind of limit that exposure.
How important is it when women go through perimenopause or menopause and we have this decrease of hormones coming into our body? How important is it to decreasing maybe the instance of osteoporosis if we get our hormones leveled out for our bodies?
Hormones is the number one prescribed medication in the functional medicine space. And
Mhm.
now in 2023, we really realized that women's health initiative of the early 2000s was wrong, and that hormones are safe for women, and you need to go to a practitioner that understands safe hormone administration. And
Mhm.
so once we realized that, and you go to hormones, you need to go to a prescriber. You need to figure out, how far past menopause are you, or are you just in menopause? Really, the best time to address this is when you first enter menopause. So if you can get on them then, that's your best chance.
Mhm.
And if you're 10 years post, 15 years post, 20 years post, there's still the
Mhm.
opportunity to go on bioidentical hormone replacement, which is the
Mhm.
same makeup of the hormones in our body. That's what the bioidentical. That's not synthetic hormones like they used in that
Right.
study. This is real hormones. So they are safe, and they're the number one preferred recommendation with functional medicine
Mhm.
physicians.
Are they making any progress as far as information that they're passing down to us women? Have there been any I don't know what the word is, any new evidence of things that we can do or just about our bones? Or is it just, it's kind of just stuck here right now?
Not really, but here's the thing. Studies cost a lot of money and take a lot of time, and they're usually funded by, you guessed it, big pharma. So they're usually funded by someone that has a reason to put that study out there to make money, right? So that's usually the case. So what are the studies that we can look at that talk about certain lifestyle aspects for bone health? Well, I focus on gut health. So gut health is really important to bone health. You need to digest and absorb your nutrients. So focusing on gut health is a really important thing. And there are a lot of research articles that have come out in the last, 5 years, maybe 5+ years, that are linking gut health to bone health. We need to digest and absorb our nutrients. So there's definitely much more information on how a unhealthy gut can contribute to bone loss and stimulate or inhibit the bone builders and stimulate the bone dissolvers. And so when we look at, there's research on that. There's just a lot of research coming out on the lifestyle parts of this, the gut component. We're getting research on having stronger muscles and how that relates to bones. Now, in terms of the hormone studies, there are some hormone studies done, but like I said, those are big, expensive studies. And unless there's a company that has motivation to make money, it's hard to get that. And it's really honestly hard to do studies. Like we hang our hat on, oh my gosh, what does the research say? And are there studies? Are there studies? Well, there's so many factors about that. There's just so much that goes into play when it comes to doing a study and figuring things out. But yeah, there is research.
Here's a question I have. So we've been hearing a lot about the GLP-1s and, taking all these. Do they have any effect, good, bad, or indifferent, on bone health?
I think we don't know enough about these medications yet. We don't know enough. I mean, there's speculation that we know that they affect digestion and absorption and assimilation. And what builds bones? Protein, vitamins, and minerals. So you need to be digesting, absorbing, and assimilating that. So if you're eating less food, then you have less building blocks to come in to build your bones. So we could deduct or speculate certain things, right? And the other component for me is that I think a lot of what's behind weight is mental emotional drivers. So
Yes.
until we deal with the mental emotional drivers of the why behind the eating, which these medications don't, then you probably have unmanaged stress in your life. And if you have unmanaged stress hormone, cortisol, the main hormone, is a bone dissolving hormone.
Ooh, wait, say that again, Debbie. Say it slow.
So cortisol, which is the main stress hormone, is a bone dissolving hormone.
That's huge right there. That's huge. Stress. Ooh, ooh, I got hot when she said that. I was just like, oh my gosh, that's huge. Now, I know you talked about nutrition and we talk about a balanced diet as much as possible. Are there foods that we shouldn't eat that can contribute to bone loss? And I'm assuming it's probably all the things that we shouldn't be eating, such as, candy and cookies and all those, all of those manufactured things. But is there certain foods that help and certain foods that don't help you?
Yes. So there are foods that I call bone dissolving foods. And that's because they contribute to inflammation. And osteoporosis is an inflammatory disease. And that's the thing that is more of a modern way of looking at things, is understanding that's an inflammatory disease. So the foods that trigger inflammation: gluten, dairy, sugar, those are going to trigger inflammation. Then we have alcohol. Alcohol is going to negatively impact your liver, and it's going to get in the way of hormone metabolism in the liver, because the liver will process alcohol before it will process hormones. Then we have caffeine. Caffeine is a diuretic, right? So it's dehydrating and it's acidic. So those are some of the main ones. There are some other foods that are in a category of food triggers. And so some of those, anything, of course, non-organic, anything that's GMO, those are all going to be like franken foods,
Right.
processed foods, high sodium foods, foods with seed oils. So all these seed oils are not good for us as well. Those are inflammatory. So
Mhm.
that's the not good for the bones category. Any questions
Mhm.
there before I go to the good foods?
No, you were very good on that. Let's hear the good foods.
So the good foods are what's gonna support what's gonna bring in the nutrients. We wanna bring in
Mhm.
protein. We need
Mhm.
probably about and there's so much controversy in this world too, right?
Mhm.
How much protein do we need? Well, probably
Mhm.
about 75 plus grams a day of protein. So we
Mhm.
need protein. And then we need fiber, 30 grams of
Mhm.
fiber a day, because that's going to feed the beneficial bone building bacteria in our gut, the bacteria that stimulate the osteoblasts, which are the bone building cells.
Mhm.
Then we need the foods rich in calcium, magnesium, boron, manganese, vitamin K, vitamin C, the B vitamins, and most of those are in the plant world. So it's not just what foods are good. I mean, superfoods for bone health would be artichokes because they're so good for gut health,
Mhm.
avocados because they have fiber and really good fats, uh, tubers, so sweet potatoes are going to be really good fiber and a lot of
Mhm.
nutrients. Of course, all the protein base, whether that's
Mhm.
tofu or high protein vegetable or animal
Mhm.
products, organic, ethically raised, non-GMO. And then nuts, seeds. So nuts, seeds, vegetables, fruits, and protein. Those are the areas that we want to eat.
Mhm. Have you ever come across someone who needed your help and you talk about their diet, what they're eating, and you say, "Are you eating vegetables?" And they say, "I don't like vegetables." You're like, "What about fruit? Well, I don't eat fruit." What do you say to someone like that? I mean, you're trying to help them as much as you can. Do you get them to try different things on a very small level, or how do you get them to eat fruits and vegetables, or is it just, okay, let's find another route to do this?
Well, so I think the thing is we need to meet people where they are,
Hmm.
right? And so if I work with someone and she tells me she has osteoporosis and she doesn't want to go on medications and she's scared to death of that, right? So
Hmm.
then I need to say, okay, so here we need to bring in the bone building blocks and here, and we need to support your gut. So how can we make these foods something you eat? Maybe for
Hmm.
that person, it's a chocolate almond butter smoothie with
Hmm.
a handful of spinach or dark leafy greens.
Hmm.
Maybe it is soup. So I used to cook for I teach yoga through a hospital, and I would cook for the caregiver classes. And one time I made this soup. I make a kale, white bean, sweet potato soup. And it's like
Ooh.
full of nutrition that's good for bone health. So I was making this soup and I put kale in it and I make sure I cut it up really thin and I put the kale in there and I put a lot of kale. And I
Hmm.
try to tell the people that are taking care of people they're taking care of, you want as much nutrition in the people you're taking care of. So I'm making the soup and then I serve everybody with the soup. And so the guy at the end of class, he came up and he goes, you know what? That's the first time I've had kale that I actually liked it. Of course, I
So it's
started
how it's presented, right?
prepared, presented, prepared, all of those things. So yeah, I mean, you have to find the way to do it. So you could put it in smoothies. It's really great to do it in soups. I make a really good fresh pea soup, spring pea
Mhm,
soup that's pureed, really
mhm,
delicious. You could put spinach and lentil soup. So there are ways to get that in there, and also I think education becomes queen here. And the more
mhm.
you learn about the fact that what you're eating is building your body and your bones and your hormones, and
Yes.
then you just start to, education has to come in there, and then learning recipes. I mean, I have a cookbook I teach. I have a community
Mhm,
that I run now that I do a live
mhm,
cooking class once a month
mhm,
because food is such a hard thing and so important.
mhm,
And so there are ways to find
mhm,
delicious vegetable
mhm.
recipes and fruit recipes.
Especially in this day and age of, you get off work, you go pick up the kids, you take them to their activities, and then it's like 7:30, 8 o'clock, and you go through a drive-through to get some food because you're just running out of time. So I find that, okay, true confession, my husband cooks in our family. I got lucky, you guys. I don't know what to say. I just got lucky. But even he has gone from where he used to cook with large amounts of, oil and all this other stuff, and he's pared it down now. So we're having, meals that are, they're plant-based. They're not, I mean, I still eat meat. I'm sorry, I just do. But I'm getting more comfortable with having non-meat kind of foods, for dinner and for lunch. And so I think it's important that if it's quick and it's easy and it tastes good, sign me up. I'll do it. And I think that's important. How do you think that's important for people too, to be able to batch cook enough where they can just, this is what we're having and it's good for you and it tastes good?
Yeah, and I don't think that you should have guilt. I mean, eating animals is not bad, eating animal protein, and especially if you try to get ethically raised and non-GMO and
Mhm,
get the best, cleanest meat that you can get, whether it's chicken, fish, or beef or pork.
mhm,
So I wouldn't feel that. I would say that, for that mom that's really busy running her kids all over, one of my favorite
mhm,
things I used to make, Kat, was salsa chicken. And I would take chicken breasts and put them in a crock pot, and I would put a jar of salsa on top of it. I would put cumin in there, a little bit of salt, and
mhm,
maybe some chili powder. And then I would put that lid on, and if you cook that at low for 4 hours, you're gonna
mhm,
have, like, almost like pulled pork. Now, I did chicken breast because I was only eating
mhm,
chicken breast. Now you have this delicious salsa chicken,
mhm,
and then it's so easy to then get either crunchy, organic corn taco shells or even soft tortillas. Better to get
mhm,
gluten-free, so they have gluten-free almond or cassava flour
mhm,
shells if you want a, like, softer shell, or corn, organic corn. And
mhm,
then, you have your chopped lettuce, avocado is really healthy, some olives,
mhm,
onions, whatever it is, cilantro if you like cilantro, and more
mhm,
salsa if you'd like. Cheese, limit the cheese. Cotija, you're gonna use less
mhm,
because it's a very salty, hard Mexican cheese. And
mhm,
that's a really easy dinner, and that's delicious, and everybody loves that. But yeah,
mhm,
having soups prepared ahead of time, doing meal prep, getting things ready. Crock pot
mhm,
is a great way. I've never used an
mhm,
Instapot, but I think a lot of people like Instapots. So getting
mhm,
all of this stuff ready beforehand
mhm,
so that you don't get hangry, you don't make
mhm.
poor decisions, and you're able to actually make the best decisions possible.
Yeah. Um, just when do you do your cooking in your group? For anyone who's, really thinking about trying to eat healthier and watching you do this, are you cooking along with other people or are they just watching you?
They watch me because I'm on Zoom, so they could
Mhm,
see me, and then I do Q&A.
mhm,
So I have a community called Stronger Bones Lifestyle, and that's where
mhm,
people can interact with me. They join my
mhm,
community. It's a fee, a monthly fee, really low monthly fee, but that's
mhm,
where I show up every day, honestly, to post something to interact with my community. So the
mhm,
Stronger Bones Lifestyle community is what it's called, and I do one cooking a month. Now, in the
mhm,
community, I keep the recording in there and I have
mhm,
recipes in there, but I do actually open it up to people who just want to come to it. So my
mhm,
website, debirobinson.com,
mhm,
DEBI Robinson.com. If they go there, I usually have a banner up at the top for my next cooking class that's coming up, and you could get on
mhm,
that list. And then we send out email reminders. But
mhm,
honestly, Kat, I run functional labs. I'm a functional health coach. I'm a yoga
mhm,
therapist. And what I find is the thing that I talk to women about the most is food
mhm,
and what to
mhm.
eat and how to make it. So it is such an important topic.
It is. It really is. And it's hard sometimes to know when you don't know what you don't know. So you have to start somewhere. And I think starting with Debbie's cooking class would be the best way, one of the best ways to go. Debbie, you talked about, not talked about it, you are a yoga therapist. I always get asked this question from people who are on the fence about Pilates and yoga. If someone's really wanting to do yoga, what type of yoga should they start with?
Well, that's a great question. And you know what? It has to be, where are you? Where do you live? Although I would say if you
Mhm,
could do online stuff. So if you're doing live
mhm,
stuff, so yoga therapy, a yoga therapist is a 1,000-hour training after a
mhm,
200-hour training. So it's a pretty extensive training. It was a 3-year
mhm,
training that I did. We're trained by doctors and nurses and
mhm,
psychiatrists. chiropractor, PT, and we're trained on body conditions. So you're going to get a more skilled, knowledgeable, well,
Mhm.
there's plenty of non-yoga therapists that are knowledgeable, but my whole hip journey started with a male yoga teacher pushing me and tearing my hip joint. So I am adamant about safe, whether you're at a safe personal trainer, a safe yoga therapist, or a safe Pilates instructor. So I've done both. I used to do private Pilates on a reformer, and I did yoga. I couldn't practice regular yoga after I had my hip injury because most yoga teachers are teaching a flowing type practice where you move
Yes.
from one posture into the next posture. And aging bodies don't necessarily flow like that. We potentially have issues that come into our tissues. We might have arthritis or something. So we don't flow the same way we did when we were younger. And it's actually not so safe to flow into and out of joints as we age. So you want to avoid a flowing practice. And then you don't want to just be in a restorative class where you're lying around on bolsters and doing relaxation, although it feels amazing. So
Yeah.
you want to try to find, of course, a yoga therapist if you could. And then you want to find not a flow practice, something where you could read the description and it sounds like this could be a good class, or maybe even ask, can I come and take a class? Can I just try one class to see if I like it?
Absolutely. I've done yoga before, and I think yoga and Pilates are kind of just like this. They go together very well. When I think of yoga, I think, yeah, in my brain, I'm flowing. My body's like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. So you have to find something to suit where you are now, correct?
Yeah. And
And yeah, and try out a class or watch a class. I love when you say, "Can I just watch a class?" You're like, "Sure, you can watch." Debbie, you are also a functional health coach. Can you tell our audience what that is exactly?
yeah, so I run functional labs. And when I was going through perimenopause and I felt like I was walking through quicksand, I had little kids, I had no energy. I found this program where I could run functional labs. And I did all these labs on myself. I did a blood lab and urine and stool and saliva and hair and all these labs to find out what's going on. And so functional labs look deep. They look at the function. And my favorite one to run is a stool lab. It's not a fun lab for people to take, but it is a fun lab for me to run. So I love running my stool labs. And yeah, so you get more information. I mean, when I run a stool lab, I get to see, are you digesting? Do you have inflammation? Do you have enough gut immune support? Do you have any parasites, bacteria, yeast, any overgrowth? And with this information, you can then identify like, uh-oh, this is probably part of what's contributing to my bone loss, which is why I am wherever I am on the scans.
Can you tell all of that just from a stool sample?
Oh, a stool sample is amazing. So the stool sample I get pathogenic bacteria, yeast, or parasites. I get to see things like food-borne illnesses. There's E. coli and Giardia and things there. So that's one thing, the top. Then I get this bacteria that will get involved with digestion that's there. Then we have this good beneficial gut area, which is all the gatekeepers. This is what maintains your mucosal barrier. Then there's an opportunistic section with all of these species that we're going to contribute to inflammation. Then we have a parasite section, yeast, worms, and then there's this entire intestinal marker section where we look at digestion. Are you digesting well? Do you have enough digestive enzymes? Are you digesting fat? Then there's a liver retoxification marker. Then there's a blood marker to see if there's anything going on. Then there's a gut immune function, or there's a gluten marker to see if you're sensitive to gluten. And then there's an inflammatory marker. So there's so much information in a stool test.
Wow, that's all I'm going to say. I knew you could tell a lot from a stool sample. I didn't know it was that many things, to be
Oh
honest
yeah,
with you. You
yeah.
know, that's just not that I'm going to be one of those people like she is, but it just it sounds very interesting. Debbie, what kind of resources, if someone's really looking to manage their osteopenia or osteoporosis, what kind of resources or books or something is available that maybe you could tell our audience a book, or maybe even become a part of your community?
Yeah, they're so confusing out there, Kat. There's so much confusion. I want to first say that the DEXA scan, which is a gold standard, which is what we use, really isn't the best technology. All that does is gives you a bone density marker, and your bone density, it's an important number to know, but it's not what indicates that you're going to fracture. So softening the blow from that is important. If you can get the new technology, which is an ultrasound, it's called REMS, radio frequency echographic multispectrometry, REMS. If you could find a place, now you're going to be paying out of pocket, probably a couple $100 to get this scan done. And then you're going to need to have it interpreted by a doctor because it's a medical screening device. So it's a newer technology. It's really being supported by the orthopedic surgeons. So this REMS technology is really the preferred, and you could get it. You have to look. It's not so easy yet, but it's becoming a thing. So you're going to hear about it more and more and more. So that's the first thing to do. The other thing is there is a lot of information overload. When you start to research and you start to get on people's lists, like when people start inviting you to their communities or to their who's the person you're speaking to? And is that the person that's going to do the work? So there's definitely some salespeople in this space, and you want to make sure that whoever you're going to work with is someone you trust, and that they know their stuff. So I would follow them, listen to what they say, on Instagram, or, listen to what's being put out there, get on an email list and just see what the quality of the information is that you're getting from that as well. And in terms of books, I don't know if there's any books necessarily. I know that there are some books out there. I don't know, like in particular, I'm not really a reader of books. I'm a consumer of like digital information, it seems. I share plenty of stuff, Kat. I've got a YouTube channel, Debi Robinson Wellness, that I have videos on. I've got a podcast, Stronger Bones Lifestyle. I interview functional medicine physicians. That's really a really great place to learn a lot of information. My community is Stronger Bones Lifestyle Community, really low cost monthly. And I'm in there daily interacting with people, posting things. So I would really recommend those. And it's not just that I'm trying to recommend what I do. There are some people in the bone health world that I definitely like and align with. I think that Margie has some really good information, but there's also some salespeople in this world that you just want to make sure that you're figuring out. You got to figure out your root causes, and are you digesting and absorbing? You've got to move every single day. You got to manage stress. Supplements are important, but you need to know what are the right supplements to take, and that's where functional labs can really help you.
So I think what you're saying is, whether or not you've had this diagnosis of osteopenia or osteoporosis, start being your own best advocate. Advocate for you, advocate for your bones and for your health. And I think that's so important, because if you just sit still, that's not helping you at all. So Debi, what's coming up for you? Where can people find you? Because you're my person. I'm going to you if I have a question about bone health. Where can people find you? What do you have coming up next that maybe somebody can join in, either in your community or whatever you've got going on?
So that's so sweet. Well, really exciting things for me, Kat, is I've been doing some TV work. So I did NBC local in Tampa, Florida, and I'm actually going back to record even more information. And my whole platform is to raise awareness to the fact that we've been misled and misguided, and that we actually are in control of our own body and our own bones. So my information is that. My community, on the 2nd and the 4th Tuesday of every month, I do a live Ask Me Anything. So people that are in my community, members of my community, I do a live 90-minute, and it's a different topic. So my last topic was on the top 10 daily habits to support bone health. And I shared like a PDF handout for that. So that was my, that's my last one. I did one on gut health, like how to start healing your gut. I did one on yoga therapy. I did one on fracture prevention. So the second and fourth Thursdays, I also bring in physicians or other bone experts to have discussions and Q&A with me. So the second and fourth Tuesday, if you're in my community, you'll be part of that. The second Wednesday of every month, I do a live cooking class. And that live cooking class has a focus. I just did one on meal prep. Before that was anti-inflammatory cooking, gut healing. I did a calcium-rich diet, mineral-rich, protein-rich. I have the one coming up is on hormone health and how to support hormones through our diet. So my community is where you'll definitely get a lot of touch points and a lot of information and a lot of things in there. So that is where I really try to get everybody to go in that direction.
I would say so. I mean, you've got a lot going on, but I think it's a lot of information you're trying to get out to other people.
Mhm.
And, I just think what you're doing is amazing, which is, when it was time to come back, I was like, I have to get Debbie back. I don't know where she is, what she's doing. I know you're moving and everything. So your time could be spent anywhere, and you chose to spend it here. And I so appreciate you for doing
Aw,
that. So I want to thank you for coming on today, Debbie. This has just been, every time I hear you talk, I'm just like, oh, I want to kind of do this, and just I'm like, no, I can't lean on my desk like that. So the information you have is just awesome. So I hope you had a good time listening to Debbie and what she had to say. You know how to follow her. You know where to go to ask her questions. You can also reach out to me also if you have a question, and I can forward it to Debbie. And this was day one, you guys. We have 6 more days. But let me tell you who's coming up. And I need my cheat sheet. So tomorrow on the 17th, I have Patricia Faust. It's her first time being on, and she's going to be talking about movement. Yeah, you see where we're going here? This is all full circle, you guys. So until next time, you're going to hear me say this. I'm Kat Corchado, your movement specialist and your host for the Revitalize Your Midlife Symposium. Keep it moving, you guys. Debbie, thank you so much. So
thank
until
you.
next time, you're welcome.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.